Hello. Today I'm gonna be responding to the favorite tanky not Hakim, and he's making a video on debunking PragerU. He's not gonna be not really debunking PragerU. Let me be clear. I don't like PragerU. They're a Zionist propagandist thingy majiggy, but I will still respond to this video because he's a tanky who wants Soviet-style socialism. So, yeah, I'm not gonna let him off the hook.
Sankara's handing you the Rashash to fend off the Frenchies. Do you accept? Joking aside, there are summer fits for all occasions, so take a look at deprogramshop.com. Don't forget that my patrons get a discount, so check the fits out with that in mind. It's time to respond to PragerU again. Now, PragerU has fallen off a little while back, but still, they uploaded a video a while back titled, "If You Hate Poverty, You Should Love Capitalism," presented by Arthur Brooks.
Bro's trying to debunk capitalism while, having sponsors. What the heck is that? What? At the very beginning of the video. What? I'm baffled. This guy complains about capitalism, but wants you to pay for his crap? What the heck is that? I mean, if you hate poverty, I mean, capitalism has lifted a ton of people out of poverty. That is just the fact. Socialism, on the other hand, communism, on the other hand, has put people in poverty, dictatorship, all of that, yada yada yada. Starvation, just like now China, the Soviet Union, and also the Paris Commune also completely collapsed, and it's just turned into a mess. Trying to advocate for communism while in your beginning of your video you have a sponsor is just completely ridiculous.
Now this video does three things which will be tackled in detail as they come up in the video. That poverty is a natural state of being, particularly before or without capitalism, that American imperialism is a good thing, in fact a peaceful thing even, and that capitalism cannot fail you, but you can fail capitalism. Rejection of capitalism by young people, minorities, and poor people is hand-waved away as a marketing failure by capitalists, ironically, who have apparently done a really bad job at showing off the successes of capitalism.
Just because you think that capitalism is a better system than communism, and also I'm not even a libertarian, but it's still silly. It's a much better system than being under communism. The idea that this is rejected by minorities. What? It's also rejected by some white people. What has it got to do with race? Why are you racializing this? This is ridiculous. I don't understand. Why is this? How is this relevant? Also, there are a lot of libertarians who are capitalists who don't like American imperialism. And also, I'm not a fan of American imperialism. And also, I'm not a fan of certain. I do like welfare for needy people. Also, I believe in charity. But I'm not a communist. It's that simple. You can advocate for maybe we should give people minimum wage. That doesn't make me a communist. Oh man. Okay. Hakim is just literally making a false equivalency. Either you're a capitalist and you're for imperialism, or either you're a leftist communist who is against American imperialism. That's nonsense. Founding fathers were against American imperialism. Know your history, buddy.
Time is it considered that capitalism's lack of fans is directly proportional to the less than ideal circumstances the system has put them in. Normally for a video like this, it would be useful to look at their sources to see where they're getting their claims from, but unfortunately that's not the case here. Their sources range from barely acceptable in secondary school to outright bullshit. There are only 5 sources of the 23 they listed that could charitably be called legitimate sources. The other 18 are a collection of newspaper opinion pieces, blog entries, a TED Talk video, and a bunch of affiliate Amazon links for Arthur Brooks' books, of course. Now, Arthur was the president of the American Enterprise Institute at the time of recording, a well-funded right-wing public policy think tank that...
What about the leftist think tanks that'll get funded by literal billionaires? Look at Kurzgesagt. Look at some of these socialist channels that are literally funded by globalist billionaires, literal billionaires, and you think you're doing as if, this is a well-funded right-wing think tank. Oh. As if there's no leftist think tanks. You're just like, whoa, that is globalists. Ah, literally, Kazakh is like shown to be funded by Bill Gates. It's so hilarious. Hakim is such a disingenuous liar.
To policymakers for rubber stamping before implementation. Now, I said they're well funded, but who is doing all this funding exactly? Let's start with the Charles Koch Foundation. The climate change skeptic Koch empire, built on fossil fuels and heavy industry, relies on think tanks like the AEI to produce academic justifications for deregulation, the destruction of environmental protections, and the crushing of labor unions. It operates heavily through Donors Trust, a donor-advised fund described as the dark money ATM of the conservative movement. Between 2002 and 2011, AEI received nearly $20 million from Donors Trust. One of the largest known accounts within Donors Trust was the Knowledge and Progress Fund, a Charles Koch property that contributed at least $8 million starting in 2005. Separately, the Donors Capital Fund provided nearly $14 million from 2010 to 2020, and Donors Trust itself added another $4 million. The structure of the American system ensures that the ultimate source of these millions is never really disclosed. There are plenty of corporate donors as well, such as oil companies and capital management groups, but you get the point. Basically, all the rich people have found it useful to their ends to support these institutions with many millions of dollars.
Fromberg is rich, and she is literally a climate activist annoying human existence. A part of human existence. She is literally funded by a bunch of groups. You're saying that the climate activists aren't paid by some other groups, shady groups? You're saying, oh look, this is like so projective. Literally a ton of climate activists are funded. And this is like, I keep disappointing. You disappoint me.
You to spend many millions on an institution I run, you'd surely only seriously consider it if the potential eventual return afterwards is greater than the sum you plan on giving me, no? That's kind of the crux of the matter. These are ideological institutions that benefit the interests of the wealthiest, and that is not you, my friend. From the very beginning of the video, the nonsense begins. First, Brooks treats poverty as an abstract, naturally occurring condition that capitalism magically cures, rather than a structural feature created and maintained by capitalism. We'll get to that.
Mate, poverty has existed way before capitalism. I mean, this Muppet thinks that poverty didn't exist until capitalism arrived. How historically illiterate are you? This is levels of stupidity I have ever seen. This guy literally is a history denier. I mean, what is this? Like saying that capitalism magically created poverty. Well, poverty existed way before capitalism, and capitalism has shown to lift a lot of people out of poverty. I'm not saying there's no flaws with it. I'm saying it has lifted a lot of people out of poverty and made things that are a lot cheaper. Not always. Yeah.
To that. But then you get this list. Globalization, free trade, property rights, the rule of law, and entrepreneurship. Oh my. According to this video, globalization is
the ever-increasing ability to move goods, people, and ideas from one distant location to another.
Which is certainly a way to phrase extortion and abuse by the ruling class. Globalization and free trade in reality has been the aggressive economic colonization of those places on Earth that have the lower labor costs due to the poverty PragerU, AEI, and others claim capitalism has alleviated. Actually, the places with the most capitalism are also the places with the most inequality and lowest quality of life. Kenya, Bangladesh, and Ecuador are far closer to the norm of capitalism than Japan or the United States. Regarding free trade, well, we know it's not really free and it's not really about trade either. This is more about forcibly opening up underdeveloped markets to the goods and services of wealthier nations so that they can outcompete local bare-bones competition.
Do you know that these countries are capitalist? Do you just claim that they're capitalists, or did you even fact check that? Because I'm very skeptical of that claim. Also, free trade does have some benefits, although you do need to. But he only is angry at free trade because it hurts other countries, but not hurting your own country. Like, he doesn't care about the citizens of his country, of the country, who are getting that goods from that country. No, he cares about these other countries. Essentially, he doesn't. Yeah, he complains about free trade, but doesn't even have a concept of, hey, we should just. I mean, free trade has some benefits. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, I'll grant you that. But he's doing this in a very, 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 very dishonest way.
And reap record profits. Privatize all local resources and land, all while employing local labor at dirt cheap prices, while influencing local politics to abandon environmental and worker protections. This is how it's always been, and this is why all these supposedly free markets across the West are obsessed with tariffs and blockades against Chinese goods, because they simply cannot compete with the price and quality, and hence stand to lose in the market competition. Funny how it stops being convenient ideological lecturing when they start losing in the game they set up, no? When these types talk about protecting property, they don't mean personal property like your toothbrush or your car. They mean the legal right to hold on to vast tracts of land, mineral wealth, and factories, the vast majority of which were historically concentrated through centuries of enclosure, theft, colonization, exploitation.
Private property is just applied. Private property is just applied personal property, and private property has actually helped the Russian serfs get out of poverty. In the Tsarist times, literally, Pyotr Stolpin literally privatized some land, and it helped a ton of peasants in Tsarist Russia. And you're gonna, oh no, I don't care about that because it doesn't follow my communist nonsense. Yeah, and it's just some of the video is just being racist towards white people. Genuinely, that's what it is. I mean, yeah.
Their property rights being defended. Yours don't matter. The so-called rule of law is a favorite catchphrase of these types, and the ruling class in general, because it projects the sense of justice, fairness, and due process. This is true for the ruling class, who occupy and manage the state as a committee of their affairs and business. What does this mean in practice for you, though? It means that the state can use violence with impunity to uphold the right of those with private property and capital over those without, even at the expense of their own rules. Look no further than the Epstein files to see this kind of double standard in action. Dozens of victims, probably more we'll never know about, an absolute cavalcade of some of the most powerful people in the world.
Rule of law is a necessary part of a human society. If you don't have rule of law, it's chaos. But is Hakim implying that he doesn't believe in rule of law? Because if that's the case, then why do you, by your standard, how is Epstein? Epstein, I don't think it had anything to do with rule of law. I think it was more to do with Israeli lobbying, which has not necessarily got to do with anything to do with capitalism. It's not necessarily capitalism the problem. The problem is lobbying and also blackmail. That has happened in every single system, and it's mainly human nature. Matey, this is not about capitalism or whatever. This is about lobbying, which is a whole different beast.
No justice has been done or even sought because it would bring the whole system down. You, however, get several years in prison for a possession of a trivial amount of some drug. Here's some relevant video and book recommendations if you're interested in a deeper dive. Then he says this nonsense.
It's worth noting that in places like East Asia, these 5 things were all made possible by the historic peace after World War II that resulted from America's global diplomatic and military presence.
Wealth did not flow from America as a gift to the world. Wealth has systematically flowed from the global south to the west. Through unequal exchange, imperialist countries drained trillions of dollars worth of raw materials and labor hours every year from the global periphery. This is an empirical fact, and you can learn more in this video here. The historic peace that the US military supposedly secured was in fact a period of mass slaughter whose scale is only partially documented, and whose purpose was opening up economies to Western capital. In Korea, Washington installed Syngman Rhee, a brutal dictator and through-and-through American asset, and to designate already existing Korean political institutions, organized and founded by Koreans that fought against the Japanese, as an anti-state organization. US forces have maintained a continuous presence since 1945, and a US general still exercises wartime operational control over South Korean forces, an arrangement that, as Goans noted, disproves the comforting myth for South Koreans and Americans that the Republic of Korea is a sovereign country, and not, what the North Korean media never grow tired of pointing out, a puppet of Washington. I cover Korea in another video here if you're interested. It was a similar story in Vietnam. Install a puppet dictator to prevent an
I'm questionable if you're saying that, what drug are you talking about, that's trivial? Because drugs are not trivial, matey. Also, is it, like, you do know that, when, like, in places like Florida where they legalized drugs, the people became drug addicts. Mate, drug addiction and, the elites doing weird stuff is both bad. Can't you just see? Oh, damn. Also, why are you, like, taking advice from a literal communist dictatorship, North Korea? I don't trust the government of North Korea one bit. But, I'm not gonna say that, South Korea isn't an asset of the US. Both North Korea and South Korea are terrible countries to live in. Why are you taking one over the other? It's pathetic.
and destroy the country only to be defeated and forced to flee in humiliating defeat. A 2008 study placed violent war deaths at 3.8 million, with good reason to consider this an underestimate. The Vietnamese government's estimate of 2 million civilian dead, combined with a conservative ratio of wounded to killed, yields 5.3 million civilians wounded, a total of 7.3 million civilian casualties. 1/3 of the wounded were women and 1/4 were children under 13, yet they lecture the rest of the world about human rights. I cover the entire period in another video here. It was no different in Indonesia, but you can read the Jakarta method for that overview. TLDR, the American government supported horrific massacres of hundreds of thousands along with a coup in order to install one of the most corrupt regimes in modern history, having embezzled over $30 billion, also that Western companies would get preferential access to Indonesian natural resources. The economic outcomes achieved by US allies in the region are then presented as the fruits of free markets and American-style conservatism. Reality contradicts this. South Korea and Taiwan did not adopt laissez-faire policies, but had what was essentially state economic planning. In Japan, the Ministry of International Trade and Industry.
Hakim, which sources are you even using? Because you're not showing where the sources or who wrote this. Because this is very sus. You're not even showing me where you got that information. Who's saying that? And Hakim, as usual, doesn't show his sources. He just shows the text, but doesn't show where it comes from. He just shows the text. Just to make himself, oh look, I'm giving some evidence. Look, I'm so evidence-based. Like, Hakim is such a liar. A complete and utter human liar.
Foreign competition and controlling foreign exchange. In South Korea, the state nationalized the banking system to direct credit specifically to preferred industrial conglomerates, chaebols like Samsung and Hyundai, tied to strict export targets. In Taiwan, the state heavily owned and controlled key upstream industries, steel, petrochemicals, banking, and used aggressive industrial policy to force the transition into high-tech electronics and semiconductors. This was top-down state planning and not a free-for-all market. At the same time, these governments were aggressively mercantilist, meaning they kept their own domestic markets closed to US goods and manipulated their currencies to keep exports cheap, while the US granted them wide-open preferential access to the massive American consumer market. By anchoring the region militarily, the US effectively subsidized the national budgets of Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. Because they didn't have to spend massive percentages of their GDP on defense, they could plow that capital directly into infrastructure, education, and heavy industry. There is one thing that we've missed here, though. Where are they getting this poverty reduction talk from? Well, it's based on the International Poverty Line. The International Poverty Line is a PR device at best and an
Basically, any organization that says, oh, like capitalism lifted a ton of people out of poverty is somehow compromised. It's like, you're so deluded and so ideological that you can't think that anyone can have a different opinion from you. Man, that's like ridiculous. Like,
Bank revised this extreme poverty line from $2.15 to $3 a day, the lower middle class income line from $3.6 to $4.2 a day, and the upper middle income line from $6.8 to $8.3. That $3 figure defines extreme poverty at a level incompatible with nutrition, shelter, or work. But this flick of a pen recalibration magically erases millions from the count without any material change in their condition. Jason Hickel documented the previous change clearly. Nothing has actually changed in the real world, of course. There are just as many poor people as there were before. Yet the World Bank announced 100 million fewer poor overnight, and its president called it the best story in the world today. The metric performs an ideological function. The historic norm of subsistence and commons-based livelihoods that are self-sufficient, non-monetized, and are outside of wage labor are coded as poor by definition. But dispossess the population, destroy its commons, privatize the land, and force it into precarious wage work in slums at $3.5 a day, and the data registers progress. I made a deep dive into the research on poverty here, if you're interested. Unfortunately for capitalists, China accounts for more than 70% of the global reduction in poverty under the World Bank's own standard, with over 770 million rural residents raised above the poverty line.
Hakim, China is economically capitalist and ideologically communist. It's not actually communist, and you're saying that this is an example of a communist country succeeding while you're like using a economically capitalist country as your evidence. That is levels of stupidity and delusional idiocy that I have ever seen. Oh man.
American conservatism and free trade. Central government poverty relief funds increased from 10 billion won in 2001 to 22.3 billion won in 2010. Cumulative inputs reached 144 billion won over the decade. Per capita net income of farmers in key poverty counties rose annually by 11%. The World Bank itself acknowledges the reduction was fundamentally a growth story, driven by economy-wide policies of structural transformation, agricultural productivity gains, and infrastructure expansion. When poverty concentrated in remote western and central regions of China after 2013, further reductions came from expanded public transfers, rural pensions, universal healthcare coverage, social assistance, and not rising labor incomes. Financing from the government on agriculture, the countryside, and farmers rose from 214 billion won in 2003 to 860.
Yeah, I'm very suspicious how he cites his sources. Also, like, there are also economically capitalist policies that you're, like, not even talking about that helped China. Huh? How many times does he has to be literally take off a ton of information away just so he can, like, completely propagandize people into his really destructive ideology?
Identifying as socialist and communist shows just how much we failed teaching students the dangers of communism and socialism.
No.
She's right. We've failed to educate people on Mao's China, Mao's China, like literally what the Red Khmer Rouge did to in like Cambodia. Thousands of skulls that were literally killed. like ton of communist atrocities that people just are not really taught. The dangers of communism. That is a fact. People are not educated in that. Hakim, Tim, no, well, education doesn't matter. Like, okay, what a muppet.
Is because they live under capitalism and see that it isn't working for them, contrary to the propaganda they're fed daily. Stagnant real wages despite skyrocketing productivity. Most Americans can't afford a $500 emergency. People are drowning in student and other debt for a job market that makes it basically mandatory to have a degree. There is no place in the US where minimum wage workers, of which over 55% are 25 and up, can afford rent, and nearly half of Americans don't earn enough to afford even a one-bedroom rental. Inflation is destroying savings and making any likelihood of ever owning something an actual fantasy. Infrastructure is crumbling, widening income inequality, climate catastrophe, the American government supporting every fascist tyrant and every dictator. I could go on and on. It isn't young kids not knowing any better, which is frankly a pathetic and infantilizing excuse. It's a natural consequence of them living in the system day in and day out. Furthermore, the American educational system, along with practically the entire base of American media, is explicitly anti-communist.
First off, inflation is mainly caused by literally regulation, and second of all, just because you live under a system that's not very good doesn't necessarily. How do you know it's capitalism? Because also, the education system is very pro-communist. How delusional are you? You are literally delusional. Literally, in schools, communism is promoted like it's nothing. It's like downplaying. It's like in schools, it's like it's just an okay thing to do. That's like literally, you just have a commie thing, and you like nobody bats an eye. What on earth are you talking about? The mainstream's education system is anti-communist is complete nonsense.
Of propaganda, people still start to look for alternatives. Well, maybe the system you're supporting isn't this great thing you're painting it out to be. At least be open to dialogue. Go give this video a watch as well, to see me dunk on some Zoomer conservative doing it for the grift. It's actually a little bit pathetic. The final statement is the ideological nail in the coffin. Capitalism works while you sleep. No. The sound that the ruling class hears while they sleep isn't capitalism working for them, but you and your loved ones. You cannot have infinite growth on our planet because of the basic limits of physics and biology. Capitalist growth requires infinite capital accumulation on a finite planet, driving imperialist resource wars and climate catastrophe, which disproportionately ravages the poorest nations of the global south. Likewise, commodities don't manufacture themselves, and nor do services carry themselves out. Workers do all the work. Brooks wonders why his ideas aren't gaining strength. As people living in the real world, we know that people, for the most part, do not form their worldviews based on think tank pamphlets. They form them based on their material reality. The global working class rejects capitalism because their real-world experiences consists of declining real wages, soaring housing costs, ecological destruction, and permanent economic insecurity. Because Brooks is a propagandist, he pretends to not understand that the failures of capitalism are structural. Regular people see that the miracle Brooks speaks of has concentrated more wealth in the hands of a few dozen billionaires than the bottom half of humanity combined, while leaving the working class one medical emergency away from homelessness. A better world is possible. That's all for this time. If you enjoy what I do, then please consider supporting me on Patreon. It really does help. I'd like to thank my patrons, so thank you too.
Yeah, this is just a lot of communist and Marxist goggle. What is he talking about? People inform their worldviews through material conditions. Huh? I get that I think you meant to say practical experience. Nobody says material conditions. No regular person says material conditions. Oh, that informs your worldview. No. People say practical experience. Also, a better world, he means communism. Communism will not bring you a better world. It will give you dictatorship, say starvation, and endless misery.